Hi, this is Pam from the Birch Cottage blog. Welcome to my video tutorial on how to make greeting cards using your embroidery machine. You will need embroidery thread, pre-wound bobbins, some heavyweight cardstock or watercolor paper, accent paper, some medium weight cutaway stabilizer, temporary spray adhesive, glue stick, or two-sided tape. You'll also, of course, need an embroidery machine, scissors, embroidery machine needle, pencil, ruler, embroidery scissors, craft scissors, and a bone folder. And of course, you will need to have an embroidery design. The first thing you'll want to do is to gather up all of your supplies. Again, I have my 5x7 embroidery hoop. I have my cutaway stabilizer. This is my color change sheet for the design I'm going to use. I also have my Fiskars paper trimmer that I will use to cut my cardstock, some spray adhesive, a metal ruler and a pencil, my embroidery scissors. I also like to use a little sewing needle, or pen actually, a bone folder that helps you get a nice crease in your card, and some watercolor paper. 140 pound is what I recommend. And you'll also need some kind of paper, lighter cardstock for the back of the embroidery design, and you will also need your embroidery thread. The first thing you'll want to do is prepare your cardstock. So take your paper trimmer and your watercolor paper, and you're going to trim it. My paper was 9" by 12", so I'm going to take the 12" side and trim it down to 10 inches. And then I'll take the other side and trim it down to 7 inches because I want my card to be a 5x7 card. And there I have it. So that's a 10x7 piece of watercolor paper. And then I'm going to take the paper that I use to cover the back of the embroidery stitch, and I will trim that down to just slightly under 5x7. Of course, you'll trim yours accordingly if you're using a different size. So then take the cardstock, and with the outside that you're going to embroidery on, make sure it's on the outside and fold. And then use your bone folder to get a nice crease in your card. And I just rub it over both sides. Again, you take the bone folder and just rub it over that fold. And then the piece of paper that you cut for the backing should fit inside your card, and you shouldn't be able to see it once you fold up your card. If so, just give it a trim along whatever edge you need to. Then we'll load our hoop. You will put cutaway stabilizer inside your embroidery hoop and hoop that. I like to line the stabilizer up with the frame part that hooks onto my machine, and I get that kind of in place and then press down, and then take the screw and tighten it real good, make sure everything is level. And then I use my cutting mat to line up. You can see, I can see the lines of my cutting mat underneath there. So I'm going to use that to help me place my card on the stabilizer. I'll take my adhesive spray and I'll spray the back side of the front of my card. And then I will take my hooped stabilizer, get it placed just right on my mat, and use that as a guide for lining up the fold. And then take my fingers and rub them around the card to make sure it's adhered pretty good to the stabilizer. And then I'm going to mark the center of my card with just a very smallest pencil mark. I'll mark 3.5 inches down and 2.5 inches from the fold. And I'm going to take this really nice eraser that doesn't leave anything behind and does a good job of erasing, and erase one of the dots. And you can see I barely have a spot on there. And then I'm going to load my design. So my design is loaded into my flash drive, and I just plug that into my embroidery machine. And then press the USB button on the front screen. And I stored it in a folder called ABC, so it would be real handy for me to catch or to find. And then I'm going to tell it to load. I will load my embroidery hoop. Now, if you have a different machine, you just follow what you would normally do with your machine. This is a Brother PE770. And then I'm going to load my machine with the first thread that my color change sheet tells me I'm going to use. So I'll take my thread, I'll put it on the spool holder, put my little cap on top of that to hold the spool in place. And then, keeping a little bit of tension of the thread on the spool, I'm going to thread my embroidery machine. This helps to make sure that I've got my thread really secured in there around the disc and stuff inside the embroidery machine. And then I take it down and I'm getting ready to thread it. This machine does an amazing job threading. So you just take the thread and press the lever, and voila, the needle is threaded. I have never not had my needle thread. And then I just take my scissors or whatever I have handy to help pull that loop through the eye of the needle. Lower the presser foot. And then I'm going to do an adjustment. Remember that mark that I made, marking the center of my card. So I'm just going to move my design over a little bit, double check it, make sure that it's lined up properly, and make any adjustments with the arrows on the screen. And when I'm ready for it to embroider, then I will just hold on to my thread for the first few stitches, press the go button, and it will begin to stitch. It starts out slowly and then it speeds up. Then I'm going to pause my stitching, raise my presser foot, take my embroidery scissors, and cut off that beginning tail of the thread. Now, the design will create what's called jump threads as it's embroidering. When it moves from one area of the design space to another, it literally jumps to that space and it leaves behind what is called jump threads. And I like to trim those off as the design is embroidering. I think it just makes for a neater end result. So before you try to trim off those jump threads, make sure you pause the stitching, use your embroidery scissors, and trim those off close to the card. And then press your button to continue with embroidering. It picks up right where you left off. It doesn't move. It just holds everything right there. It just kind of pauses, and then it will continue on with the stitching. And you see there's another jump thread. I'm just a little OCD about it because I know that if I leave those jump threads there, there's a likelihood that in the embroidery design it will stitch back over top of that stitching, and I can see it. I mean, no one else will probably even know that it's there, but I don't like to leave that behind because I don't want it to be stitched over top of. So now I'm going to do a color change based on my color change chart. Raise my presser foot, which releases the thread so I can pull it out. Take the spool of thread off the thread holder and wind it up. Set that aside, and I will, sorry, I dropped my cap. I will load the next color thread and then put my end cap on to hold the spool in place. Again, I will hold on to the thread next to the spool so that it puts a little bit of tension on it, and I will again wind the thread through my embroidery machine and then slide it over to the last little step, press down on the lever, and it automatically threads my needle. Again, I'll press down the presser foot, hold onto the thread, and press the go button for it to continue stitching, and the embroidery machine will just pick up exactly where it left off. It took it probably 30 minutes to make this design, to embroider this design with my machine, so it does take some time, but I typically I do recommend you keep an eye on your machine while you're embroidering, but I usually have something else going on when I'm working on my computer or maybe my Cricut or my sewing machine. So I have kind of multitasking while this is taking place. And this video is going at a faster speed. This is not how fast this machine stitches. And my machine has a limitation of a 5x7" design. So I can't embroider anything at one time that is larger than 5" by 7". Now again, I'm going to do a color change based off of the color change chart for my design. I will raise the presser foot, remove the spool of thread, pull the thread out, and load the next spool of thread. So I just want you to see here what exactly I'm doing. I'm loading this piece of thread. I am threading my embroidery machine, keeping my right hand on the spool to apply some tension to the thread as I thread the machine. Once you have the thread, you press the threader button, you just slide it down, and it threads the needle perfectly every time. And then, like I said, I like to take my scissors or tweezers or whatever I have handy to pull that thread out of the eye of the needle. And then I put the presser foot down and press the go button again, and just follow the prompts on the screen. And again, if I have jump threads that I want to trim, I go ahead and trim those off as I notice them being created. You can wait until the design is done to trim your jump threads. It's just a personal preference and it depends on the design. So since these are kind of a thin design that we're embroidering on this cardstock, I think that it shows up more than on something that is a satin stitch or more filled in. So I do like to trim those up on these particular types of projects. And then my fourth and final color change. Again, I'll raise the presser foot so that it releases the thread. I'll take the spool off the holder, wind up that thread, set it aside or put it away, and then load my fourth and final thread onto the machine. Again, keeping some tension on the spool of thread, I take my left hand and I wind the thread through the embroidery machine. Press the lever to thread the needle. I want you to see how easily this works. So there's my needle. You can see the eye of the needle. I pull it over to my last step, press on the lever, and it just threaded the needle just like that. So then you want to hold on to the end of the thread like you do anytime you're first starting your first few stitches. And once it's gone a few stitches, you can release that thread. And I usually just go ahead and trim it off. And then press go and let your machine continue embroidering. This is kind of hard to see here, but it's doing a white stitch, white thread on this part of the design. And my embroidered green card is almost through embroidering. When it gets to the very end, it will tell me that it's finished, and then I'm ready to unhoop my design. Raise the presser foot, release the hoop, unscrew the hoop so it releases the tension, and now I'm ready to trim away the stabilizer. I do recommend that you trim away the stabilizer close to the stitching, especially on these cards, because we're going to glue a piece of paper on the back of them, and we want to make sure that paper is glued to the card and not the stabilizer. So trim that up as best you can. And now we're going to use either some two-sided tape or some glue to glue down this accent paper, which is just a lighter weight cardstock that I'm using. And I'm telling you, I've used two-sided tape, and I've even used this Elmer's craft glue, and I kind of like the results of the two-sided tape better, but you can use whatever you have. You can certainly use tacky glue or some other type of craft glue, glue pen, and line up that sheet of paper close to the fold, and then from the middle out, line it up and press it down. And here I'm doing another one that I'm just applying it glue, using my glue stick around the perimeter, and I'm again going to line it up, and from the center press out to press down that paper. Maybe use my bone folder to press the fold again and make it nice crisp fold. And there we have our machine embroidered greeting cards. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to like it below if you enjoyed this, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and come visit me at the Birch Cottage blog. Thank you.